everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video review, and this will be the latest movie face-off edition where I'll look at two movies of a similar genre, release date or franchise, and have a debate and comparison as to which one is the superior film. And in this edition we will focus on the iconic movie monster Godzilla, and despite being created way back in 1954, the character is currently enjoying its most prolific and commercial phase with multiple live action movies and animation ever since 2014. And it's here that we will look at two installments that are widely considered to be the best Godzilla movies of recent times, and that being the 2014 version and also most recently Godzilla Minus One. Released on May the 16th, 2014, the Gareth Edwards project was the second big budget Hollywood adaptation of Godzilla following the 1998 film directed by Ronald Emmerich, featuring a whole host of American actors including Bryan Cranston, Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's British, and also Elizabeth Olsen. It was the first in the intended monsterverse surrounding the monster. Coming in more recently in December 2023, Godzilla Minus One was produced by Toho Studios, and it was the first project outside of their joint contract with Legendary Studios. The Japanese production had an all-Asian cast, and it was directed by Takashi Yamakaze. And produced reportedly for only 10 to 12 million, it literally was 1/10 of the budget from the 2014 movie. So which of these installments proves to be amongst the best Godzilla film of recent times? Well, when we look at the first element in terms of story, and it's actually a much closer contest than many would think. Godzilla from 2014 has the more wider spanning narrative, first dealing with scientist Bryan Cranston mourning his wife's loss in a nuclear plant. He later dies after investigating the monster's origin, before later we see his son, who is a soldier named Ford, who also gets involved in the military resistance against the Mutos. We also have more reference within the mythology and history of the monsters, as well as painting Godzilla much more as the protagonist of the story. Now, Godzilla Minus One was much more smaller in scope, setting itself in 1945 Japan near the end of the World War II conflict, as the military faces an all-out struggle to stop the rampant Godzilla destroying cities at will. It is also combined with the story of the pilot named Kochi, who suffers PTSD from an earlier Godzilla attack, and he also deals with losing his parents in the Tokyo bombings, and he also has to take care of another family who also suffered the effects from the war. So whilst there is far less world building here, Minus One is much more focused and therefore leaves a much more stronger impression in terms of its story. Whereas the 2014 version can be a bit scattershot with all of the various elements that it's trying to juggle, it does become a bit less engaging and less invested with its story as a result. And yes, at times the overall pacing of Minus One in terms of its story can take away from the intensity of the action sequences. I still think there's enough here to make Minus One a much more stronger element in terms of the story that it's trying to tell. We then talk about action and spectacle, and contrary to popular opinion, I think this is again a closer contest. The 2014 version has much more in terms of quantity and variance. Whether it's the Mutos attacking submarines or later on Las Vegas, we see all of their conflicting battles against Godzilla, so you do get plenty of bang for your buck in terms of overall spectacle. Now Minus One, which as mentioned before, is much more of a resistance against the singular threat of Godzilla. So you only get one monster or so to speak, but there's still plenty of spectacle to be had here, and most of the Godzilla scenes and action are simply phenomenal. Whether it's the opening sequence of Godzilla attacking the army base in its much more smaller form, we have his devastating rampage throughout the city of Ginza, we see all of those awesome atomic blasts, we have the tense ocean sea chase scene pursuing the ship, and the military's final all-out attack strategy with the Freon tanks is equally as spectacular and probably even more impressive, again given the movie's smaller budget, and the action really grips you, carrying an extra intensity and suspense and tension, which you don't really get with the 2014 version. So in this mark again, I give the nod to Godzilla Minus One. And coming off the spectacle, we go on to the cinematography, and once more Minus One comes out on top here. Once more the action is much more compelling because of the staging of the sequences. Whereas other Godzilla movies of recent times just provide noisy wall-to-wall spectacle that loses its effect after a while, Minus One expertly knows when to push with the explosiveness and when to give the audience the much more silent moments And when we add in everything from the musical score and also the audio mixing and editing, everything is superior, and it just makes for a much more immersive viewing experience. And it's quite the example for modern day blockbuster movies, especially monster epics, in how to make sure that the spectacle really matters so that you keep your audience engaged. And spinning off from spectacle and cinematography, we then talk of the effects, and once more Minus One deserves to mention here. It's mightily impressive, especially given the film's budget. The atomic breath scenes especially are truly awe-inspiring, and Godzilla himself for the most part is convincingly rendered. Now there are slight flaws in terms of his movements, which do come across as a bit stiff and a bit rigid, and some of his regeneration moments are not quite as convincing. Now whilst it's typical to show less favour to big budget Hollywood movies, Godzilla from 2014 in terms of its effects still manages to impress as well. You do get that real sense of size in terms of Godzilla, and all of the scenes where he battles the other Mewtwo's again are very convincing. I'd still say overall that the scenes can be a bit too greyish and a bit too dark, and it takes away some elements of the spectacle because you can't exactly make out what's going on amidst all of the carnage. So whereas Minus One has a bit more clarity and a bit more visual flair in terms of its overall effects, and that's why I give the overall nod to it in terms of the effects. We then talk about characterization, and 2014 version took the very novel approach of making Godzilla the protagonist, taking on other Mewtwo's, which did of course make sense considering this was the start of the whole monsterverse, but sadly the human characters don't make as much of a strong impression. It's only really Bryan Cranston who had any semblance of gravitas, but he ends up being killed in the early stages of the story. Now Minus One had Godzilla as the antagonist, and it suits this movie so well, with the monster having a real menacing threat all throughout the movie. The ocean sequence alone especially has been compared to Jaws, and you can see why in so many ways. Now of course where Minus One truly excels is the human characters. Within its story you have genuine elements of PTSD, that sense of loss and anguish and self-reflection. We see the impact of the war and its overall effects on the population and also the economy. Now whilst this creates a more somber downbeat tone that can affect the film's pacing, it still adds a weight and gravitas that we just don't see within the 2014 version. So we then move on to box office, and overall both movies were very successful in theatres on their release. 2014 was the biggest hit, grossing a very impressive $529.1 million from a $160 million budget, getting the Monsterverse from Legendary Pictures off to a great start. Now Godzilla Minus One managed to take in $115.8 million, which is even more of an achievement given the film's minute budget as mentioned before, which ranged from around $10 to $12 million in terms of its budget. We then talk about impact and legacy, and prior to popular opinion, I'm going to give this mark here to the 2014 version. Yes, Minus One gained largely positive reception from both critics and fans, beating out larger movie Hollywood productions to win the Oscar for 2024 for Best Visual Effects, and that was well deserved. But as mentioned at the start of this video, Godzilla in terms of an IP is the most prolifically mainstream that it's ever been, and the successes of the 2014 movie garnered a whole host of content, introducing the King of the Monsters sequel in 2019, and we even saw a successful crossover of movies with King Kong, with the most recent effort being Godzilla x Kong A New Empire, which has managed to gross over $580 million in 2024, making it the highest ever grossing Godzilla movie ever. But we then finish on a summary, and ultimately Minus One is the superior film. In terms of the Godzilla scenes itself, it matches or even surpasses the 2014 film. In terms of action and spectacle, it gives that greater sense of dread and tension. Plus, alongside the superior character story elements and the human personalities, all of this makes Godzilla Minus One most definitely the best Godzilla movie of modern times so far. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings when drawing comparisons to Godzilla films from 2014 and also Minus One from 2023. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other movies, television series, or any other issues or topics within the pop entertainment scene that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.